A cutting-edge indoor oyster hatchery was built as a laboratory for scientists to tackle some of the Chesapeake Bay's most pressing health concerns. On a windy morning in Talbot County, the crew of Tilghman Island Seafood loads cages of spat on shell onto their boat, an oyster planting vessel aptly named the bivalve.
Well, first of all, welcome to Tilghman Island, and we're on the Naps Narrows here right now. Today we just loaded up the bivalve with roughly 9 million baby oysters that are going to be planted up in Eastern Bay this afternoon.
Nick Hargrove's crew are planting spat on shell, or baby oysters. And they may be small, but the bay depends on them.
I think more oysters in the bay is good for everybody. Oysters are filter feeders. They help extract the nitrogen and phosphates out of the water. They help to keep the algae levels down and the algae blooms down, which helps keep the water clearer. So when I first started in this industry, we had no hatcheries that were privately owned in the state of Maryland. So we were very limited to the amount of larvae that we were able to get, which really put a hindrance on our restoration work.
But the bivalve story doesn't end here, and doesn't start here either. Rather, the story begins here, on a glass slide. This oyster began its life just 2 weeks ago in this laboratory.
We're a 501c3 nonprofit, and we were basically formed to produce oyster larvae and seed for the industry, to support the industry.
Stefan Abel founded Ferry Cove Shellfish 20 years ago with a simple goal in mind: grow oysters, not by the thousands, not by the million.
We're looking right now about 1.5 billion to 2 billion oyster larvae that'll be produced.
And it all starts right here. And despite the ticking computers and humming engines, a much simpler trick is used to breed oysters. A slight shift in temperature and a sacrificial lamb. Well, oyster.
If they don't start spawning, what we do is we shuck one and then we stimulate them with gametes from either a male or a female oyster.
In other words, they'll use the reproductive cells from one oyster to trigger spawning mechanisms in other oysters. But they have to keep a close eye on these shellfish.
We're looking to see if we can detect any release of any kind of gametes in the water. Once we distinguish what sex they are, we put them in their own buckets of females and eggs. That way we can control fertilization.
And staff collect the oysters as they begin to spawn. Then place them into separate containers. From here, the eggs and sperm are collected. After the eggs are collected and fertilized, the newly formed embryos are transferred to vast, highly engineered larval tanks. Here, temperature and oxygen levels are monitored, and algae is automatically pumped into their tanks.
Ferry Cove is very unique. It's one of the more advanced hatcheries in the country. What we've done is we've employed an awful lot of computer controls in the facility to simplify the task for staff, including these algae bioreactors that are behind me here that are fully automated. They'll run for several months at a time, automatic feeding. So in essence, the oysters are on a nonstop algae buffet.
Because of the automation and constant monitoring of these systems, Ferry Cove operates with just 7 employees. And after a couple weeks of feeding and nurturing, these oysters are ready for the next stage of their lives. First, Ferry Cove provides them with a shell, ground up or whole. Fortunately, they have a few thousand to spare.
Hatcheries notoriously don't make a lot of money. It's almost like the Walmart model where we do high volume, low cost because the margins are really tight.
Even on this grand scale, it comes down to one small moment: this oyster's foot finding an old shell to hold fast. Once attached, these baby oysters are ready to be sold to watermen like Tilghman Island Seafood.
In 2010, there were hardly any growers that were doing aquaculture, and now there's several hundred. So the demand for product is there. It's just a matter of producing it
By 2011, the bay's oyster population had crashed, down to just 3% of what it was in the 1800s. But Ferry Cove's supply is what keeps aquaculture operations like Tilghman Island Seafood working and planting these young oysters back into the bay.
Since the onset of Ferry Cove, we've been able to do hundreds of millions of oysters every year now. You know, these oysters here, yes, it may be 9 million oysters on that boat, but they can produce 90 million oysters when they decide to spawn.
From a drop of water in a lab to millions planted in the bay, Ferry Cove could be the future of rebuilding what was once lost. Thanks for watching Maryland Farm and Harvest. We hope you liked the video. Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss out on future videos. To learn more about our show and watch full episodes, check out mpt.org/farm or just click the link in the description.